Chapter 6, Part 2. The hardest part of getting out of San Antonio was crossing Highway 1604 where it meets up with I-35. Highway 1604 acts like a gatekeeper which keeps all the people of San Antonio without a car inside. You either had to be in a huge body of steel or you were basically not allowed to leave. Very few people have crossed the intersection by foot because you have to dodge cars going 80 miles per hour. One misstep and you're dead. We found a thin concrete barrier to walk across the freeway while dozens of cars zoomed below our feet. The barrier was on a steep angle, and at one point we almost lost balance and went tumbling into rakish traffic where we would have been ripped apart by evening commuters. After we broke out of the concrete pen, it was a straight shot, 60 miles to Austin. We kept a steady pace, on the shoulder, and just about every car driving by took their eyes off the road just long enough to stare at the two young men walking along the freeway with backpacks. When it got dark and the temperature dropped, we needed to find shelter or we'd freeze. We would have liked to have kept going, but it wouldn't have been smart to walk at night because of the attention it would have brought. Michael spotted a decaying shed in a field about 400 yards from the road. It was in the middle of a clearing and looked like no one had been there in years. The crusty building had one small triangular window busted out on its side. Its roof was almost gone, half eaten by years of termites, shipworms, and God knows what else. The grass in the field was separated. The shack from the freeway was waist high, likely full of snakes. But it was nighttime and in the middle of winter, so we figured most of the poisonous ones were probably asleep or hibernating. We had to move quickly from the road to the building because if anyone saw two bums jostling toward a vacant shack on private land, they almost for sure called the cops. Once we got to the building, I told Michael to go inside and check for animals or bums. I waited a safe distance away and heard Michael doing some rustling and chewing. I clenched my fists, waited for an encounter, but was relieved to see two scruffy animals run off in the distance. Just a couple of critters, Michael yelled. All clear. The inside of the shed was scarier than the outside. The only light came from the moon shining in the triangular window. It brightened the place just enough to see the white termites and albino roaches crawling around what was left of the walls of the shack. It's not that bad, Michael said. I'd stay here for a while if we didn't have somewhere to go. We sat on the broken floorboards and leaned up against each other back to back. Michael opened a can of beans and broke out the weed. We each took a couple hits. It was relieving to get high and relax after such an exhausting day. Marijuana puts things in perspective. Nothing is as bad as you think. Neither of us could fall asleep, so we stayed up smoking cigarettes, telling jokes, and figuring out what we were going to do when we got to Austin. While we were talking, we came up with the idea of me joining a research study. We knew a place that tested drugs on people for money. Michael did it a couple years earlier, and their only requirement was good health and clean urine. When the sun came up, we saw that the shed we were in was apparently some kind of model airplane clubhouse from the early 1980s. There were worn-down paintings of different model airplanes on the wall and airplane pieces scattered on the floor. Apparently, we were the only souls to visit this post-apocalyptic Norman Rockwell scene in years. After an hour, we hit the road. I couldn't believe how dirty we'd gotten. The first thing we needed to do was find a bathroom to clean up and hide what we could of being homeless. The second day was much harder, and the can of beans we shared the night before didn't give us much energy. After a couple miles, we decided to use one of the few dollars Mom gave us on a cheap hamburger. I suggested we sit down, neatly cut the burger in half, and take a much-deserved break, but Michael ripped it in two and we devoured it like starving animals. By midday, we made it through most of New Braunfels without any problems from the police or passing cars. A few jerks yelled obscenities out their windows, but overall it had been an unruffled journey and a great time to think about where we'd been and where we were going. You ever been in a car? I asked Michael, jokingly in a rundown old man homeless voice. He started laughing and said, also in the southern homeless voice, Once, a long time ago. The joke kept our spirits up for the rest of the day, and we added variations to it, like, You ever been in a house? And you ever had a hot shower? The absurdity of the joke helped us ignore the people driving by gawking, like we really hadn't ever been in a car or had a shower. On that second day, we walked as far as we could until the sun set and we were falling over, drunk with fatigue. It was colder than it was the night before, and we were walking north into the wind. We needed shelter, so I suggested camping under a highway overpass, but we didn't want to trespass on another homeless person's camp. We thought about jumping a vacant house's fence and huddling down on an empty porch, but that would have been breaking and entering, a felony. The temperature dropped and the wind began to blow hard. We were running out of time and started feeling the early stages of hypothermia. I can still remember the sting of rain falling on my neck while we scurried around trying to find anywhere warm. We finally jumped a barbed wire fence and came across a draping Texas oak tree, not too far from a "Trespassers will be shot" sign. We hunkered under the tree and leaned up against each other, back to back, wet and shivering. Not exactly trying to sleep, just trying to survive till morning. The tree we were under was only a few miles from where our father lived. After he kicked us out, he had $1 million mansion custom built for him and our sisters. He never gave us the address and made it clear we weren't welcome. I wonder if the local papers would have mentioned him and his expensive house if they found his two frozen sons under that tree the next day. I don't know, I do wonder that. After a few agonizing hours, the dark turned to an overcast gray and it was warm enough to open our eyes. It was still below freezing, so we had to get walking in order to get our blood circulating. We didn't say much. After a night like that, there's not much to say. Our silence broke in unison when we noticed a squad car pulling up. We were honest. We told the cop we were walking to Austin to make a better life for ourselves. I told him I planned to go to UT, and he laughed. UT, he said? You're almost on the side of the freeway. I went to UT, he told me. You'd be lucky to go to cooking school. The cop didn't have shit besides being a prick, so he called for backup, and a minute later 2 more squad cars came to assist. They searched us, ran our names, threw a fit, but couldn't come up with shit. I had dozens of paid warrants all around Texas, but I knew jurisdictions rarely shared that information and wasn't worried a bit. Finally, after the banner and derision, they let us go. It took over an hour, but gave us a break from walking. Unaware to me, Michael did have contraband on him. He had a small amount of pot stashed in his wallet. He wanted to make sure we had some weed to smoke for our journey. Every night, after we made camp, he'd break it out and we each take a couple hits. It gave us something to look forward to. By the time we got through San Marcos, we started to feel the effects of our 70-mile hike. Michael developed a cough, and I slightly twisted my ankle. I found a wooden crutch, and Michael stole some cough drops, and we trekked on. When we got to the outlet malls in San Marcos, we stopped at the first fast food place we saw, but hesitated to go inside. It was during lunch rush and packed with the Texas State crowd. Normally, we wouldn't have given a shit, but we looked and felt dirtier than either of us had ever been, so we decided to sit on the grass and wait for business to calm down. We needed a break and the grass was soft. We'd come a long way and felt proud. It was a peaceful moment until a truckload of Texas State students drove by whooping and hollering at us from the windows of the new pickup truck their daddy bought them. We didn't want to go inside with all the college kids, but our stomachs needed their hamburger rations, so we dusted ourselves off and went to claim our cheeseburger. The second we swung open the door, the brats snickered at our appearance. We ignored them, ordered our food, and sat down. After we got it, I got out a knife and began cutting it in half. The college students thought this was funny, and one of them even had the nerve to throw a quarter in our direction. Michael didn't hesitate to snatch it up off the floor before we left. By the end of the day, we made it to the rest stop in Kyle and were less than 15 miles from Austin. The sun went down and we took a break on the grass, watching the car's flickering lights on I-35. Our bones ached and we weren't looking forward to that last stretch. When we finally got up a couple hours later, we walked another hour until we got to the Austin city limits road sign. Totally beat, we jumped a barbed wire fence and spent a second night illegally camping on somebody's land. Waking up at dawn, we walked straight down the side of the highway and got to the outskirts of town. After we started seeing homes and businesses, we finally exited I-35. We got to the southernmost Austin City bus stop, took our heavy backpacks off, and threw our filthy asses on the bench. We were malnourished, dehydrated, and completely exhausted, but we'd walked from San Antonio to Austin, just like we said we would. As soon as we got on the bus and made it to campus, we got into a big argument. We made it to Austin, but things were just as hard as they were when we were walking. I suggested we use the few quarters we had left to call Mom and tell her we were okay. She had a way of calming us down after we'd been fighting. We used the payphone at Adobe Mall, and as soon as she picked up, I knew she'd gotten worse. I felt guilty because I knew She'd been worried sick about her twin boys walking to Austin like a couple of highway ruffians. I tried to calm her down and told her everything was going to be okay, but she blamed herself and said she wished she would have been a better mother. She said she stopped taking her medication. It's the only thing I can do to get my strength back, she said. I didn't know what to tell her. I wanted my pre-medicated mother back since I was 10, but the antipsychotic pills she took prevented schizophrenia. The side effect of the hardcore prescription was that it left her with no energy to do anything besides go to work, come home, and sit in front of the TV and watch ads for more medication. I didn't want her to worry and told her how well we were doing. I told her about my financial aid for college and that I'd be a full-time student at ACC that fall. She said she was proud of me, and that's when I knew she was losing it. Before I even asked, she said she was going to send us $50. Michael spoke to her a few minutes after I did, and we both felt better and stopped fighting with each other after the call. We picked up the money at a 7-Eleven an hour later. It felt good having money for food, but it was priceless knowing someone out there cared. We immediately went to the food court of Dobie Mall and in less than 2 minutes devoured 4 slices of pepperoni, our first hot meal in days. After pizza, we hid an ashtray for a couple half-burnt cigarettes and smoked them in front of the clock tower, watching pretty YouTube girls walk by. When it got dark, we walked to the edge of campus and found 2 buildings under construction, the future home of the Blanton Art Museum. In a few years, the half-built buildings would be Central Texas's prized art gallery, but on this particular night, it housed 2 shivering young artists. We climbed over the yellow caution tape and crawled up a half-built staircase where we found an empty gallery and sat on the cold, sawdust-sprinkled concrete floor, the perfect smoke spot. We thought about staying there all night. Neither of us wanted to go back out in the cold, but we were trespassing, and it would have been too hard to get ourselves up off the cement early the next morning before the construction crew got there. So we got up, dusted off, and walked a couple miles to Shoal Creek, only place we could think of going. For the next week, until my physical for the research study, we didn't steer far from UT. We hid our backpacks and unused dirty clothes under the rocks at Shoal Creek. We were still very dirty, but it wasn't as obvious that we were homeless. I was even confident enough to talk to a few cute college girls. It was fun being on the drag and going to Barnes & Noble, the fun arcade, and half-price books. Michael would get a cheap cup of coffee at Metro Coffee every morning. He never told me where he got the money. I guess he had a secret coffee fund. Most of the day we spent out of the cold watching TV in Dobie Mall. The spring semester was about to start and students were slowly returning from winter break. I'd sit there and watch them arrive. The hardest part of winter hit while we were camping at Shoal Creek. Every night, we'd crawl under a huge limestone rock. It was the only thing we could do to stay warm. When the sun came up, we'd head down to the Dobie Mall bathroom where we'd take turns warming up under the electric hand dryer with the Capitol's other resident bumps. We would have tried panhandling, but we didn't really fit the part like drag rats did. We were just as down and out as they were, sleeping in the woods, not a penny to our name, not much family to speak of, but we couldn't ever justify begging when we had our own arms and legs. On the day of my physical for the research study, I knew I had weed in my system, but we had a potion that I stole from a head shop that supposedly removed all traces of toxins from being detected in urine. I drank it an hour before my physical, but I had no idea if it would work. Michael waited outside the lab rat place with our blankets and bags. If I was accepted, he was going to hang out around Austin for a few weeks until I got out with the money. We needed the cash, but more importantly, I craved a warm bread and a break from homelessness. I went inside, and the first thing they did was take me to a room with a bunch of other people in it. A few of them gave me dirty looks. They could probably tell I hadn't showered in a month. After sitting in silence for 20 minutes, a young nurse came in and said everyone had to take their socks and shoelaces off for the official weigh-in. A lump built up in my throat and my heart began to race. They couldn't have caught my feet at a worse time. I hadn't taken my shoes off since San Antonio, and I had over 100 miles worth of sweat, blisters, and ripped toenails hidden inside my cheap sneakers. I stayed positive and told myself that since it was so cold outside, the winter weather counter-reacted with the sweating in my feet and created a neutral area inside my shoe which made an undetectable odor. The assumption proved incorrect because when I took off my shoes and peeled off my bloody socks, the room quickly became engulfed with toxic gas, ammonia, one of the worst odors known to man. It was so embarrassing. Some people thought they were getting pranked. I was afraid of getting arrested. I tried to remember if I'd actually ever heard of anyone being prosecuted for smelly feet. Some people walked out, but most of them just held their noses and looked away. I stared at the floor and my disgusting curled toes in shame. My face was as red as my blood-stained socks. I couldn't look anyone in the eye. The nurse giving the weigh-in stared at me. She didn't know what to do. They obviously hadn't gone over this in training. Finally, she told everyone to stay put while she spoke with me in private in the hall. I wanted to crawl under the rock I'd crawled out of. The nurse didn't bother me with too many questions. She politely asked why my feet smelled so bad and if there was something wrong with them. I told her I hadn't showered or taken my shoes off in a few weeks because it had been so cold outside. She thought about this for a few long seconds before finally asking if I was homeless. To keep my embarrassment to a minimum, I left out the part about me walking to Austin and told her that I was indeed living on the streets. Then she politely informed me that their facility didn't accept homeless people. I apologized, put on my shoes, and left. Michael was waiting for me in the parking lot and knew I got rejected the second he saw me. What? He screamed. The potion didn't work? I never even got a chance to use it, I told him. She said their facility didn't take homeless people. How'd she know you were homeless, he asked. The second I was there, I had to take off my shoes and socks. What? He barked. I told you to clean your fucking feet. Well, looks like we're going back to San Antonio now. Michael doesn't like surprises, and if something goes off course, he won't hesitate to abort. I wasn't accepted in the research study, so now he wanted to go back to San Antonio, and he brought up the usual selling points. We could use Mom's house to shower. We knew the lay of the land, and he was going back with or without me. Fine, I'll go back, I said, for Mom. It would have been too hard to walk back to San Antonio, so we either had to find a ride or enough money for bus tickets. We'd already spent the $50 Mom sent us, and we would have asked for more, but since she quit her job, Guy wouldn't even let her buy groceries. We tried doing day labor, but work was scarce. We hung around a day labor place for a few days, but they didn't offer us a single job. Michael suggested we call one of our sisters in San Marcos. She lived at our father's mansion and had a part-time job in Austin. Michael knew she drove back and forth along I-35 every day. She probably saw us walking, but never in a million years would have offered us a ride. I wasn't thrilled about the idea and took a walk around campus while Michael used the payphone to call her. I strolled around the clock tower and went inside a few buildings. I felt more comfortable in the areas and streets surrounding UT. Whenever I was in an official University of Texas building, I always feared someone would notice and tell me to leave. When I got back to Dobie, Michael said she'd lend us $40 and told him to wait for her at the Slotsky's near campus. While we waited on the deli's outside patio, the smell of fresh-baked bread was torture. We thought about robbing the place just for their sourdough. Our sister was almost an hour late when she pulled up in the new Chevy Tahoe our father got her. She didn't bother turning off her engine, wouldn't look either of us in the eye, and jumped out like she was pulling an annoying flyer off the windshield. She handed each of us a $20 bill like we were children, and quickly got back in her expensive SUV before speeding down 29th Street to Lamar. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking across town to the Greyhound station. When we finally got there, we saw a bunch of people huddled around a TV hanging from the ceiling. There was a local weatherman talking about an ice storm heading toward Texas. Michael and I stood at the back of the crowd and listened too. It felt relevant. We watched the weather forecast for a minute before buying one-way tickets to San Antonio. It felt good knowing we were going back to familiar ground, but our bus didn't leave until early the next morning. So we spent the night hanging around the station, chatting with transients, bumming smokes off elderly, and playing video games against little kids. We didn't say much during the ride back. Michael slept most of the way while I stared out the window at the passing ground we walked on 2 weeks earlier. I felt like I was in a music video. You can try to predict it, but you never know how you're going to get somewhere. It was dark when we got to the San Antonio Greyhound station, but the place was bustling with late-night Latinos and local cholos. The San Antonio Greyhound station is nothing like the one in Austin. The one in Austin is spacious, clean, and well lit, but the San Antonio station is dangerous, crowded, and scattered with puddles of urine. We got off the bus and squeezed our way through the crowd of late-nighters, over the sticky floor and into the January morning. After walking north a few miles, we jumped on a bus heading down Broadway. We got off the bus at Austin Highway and walked another 2 miles to Mom's house. Guy hadn't left for work yet, so we hung out in a ditch across the street and waited patiently. We sat there, Indian style, and spoke about our journey. We were melancholy and drained, but very relieved to have made it back to the closest thing we could call home. We wanted to feel like we'd accomplished something and didn't walk to Austin for no reason, so we sat in the ditch for a couple hours going over everything we'd experienced in the past 3 weeks. We got lost in conversation. Guy had long gone to work. It was safe to crawl in through a window and wake up Mom. She was happy to see us. She gave us each a big hug and checked to see if we still had our limbs. You boys walked all the way to Austin, she said. Well, that's something you can be proud of. It was good seeing her, but neither of us had seen her this crazy since the third grade. She developed noticeable tics and was saying weird things like, put salt in before you fry an egg, or a sweater is useful when it rains. Yeah, we get it, Mom. A sweater when it rains, Michael told her. Sit down, she said. I want to talk to you boys. That was from the book Gonzo Education, Chapter 6. That's me right there. This is my first memoir. I'm really proud of it. This book starts when I drop out of high school and ends when I graduate from college. You can get it for free on Kindle. It's also like $5 or $6 on Amazon. If you liked my reading of it right there, go ahead and go to the Amazon page and write a little something. You can write a little review. It really helped me out. And check out my other stations, my other channels as well. Thank you for watching.